The next question is for Congresswoman Baldwin. Congressman, in your last response, you mentioned applications and testing, which brings us to the subject of education, close to the hearts of many of the people in this audience. One of the achievements that President Bush and the Republican houses of Congress both can claim for themselves is the passage of the No Child Left Behind Act. And that act has, of course, received support from Democrats as well as Republicans, in at least some of its particulars. What is your position on the No Child Left Behind Act and similar measures of its kind? And more generally, what do you view as the federal role in education?
I would give No Child Left Behind mixed reviews. There are certainly some components of this large piece of legislation that have been helpful and instructive. There are certainly other provisions in No Child Left Behind that have been particularly troublesome to school districts across the country. And fortunately, Congress has an opportunity in the next Congress to revisit the No Child Left Behind legislation because it is up for reauthorization. But if I would give the underlying bill mixed reviews, I would give the performance of the Republican majority in funding No Child Left Behind a failing grade. The problem is that that bill was authorized at funding levels far in excess of what this Congress, this Republican-led Congress, has been willing to spend, leaving states and school districts with a mandate with no funds or not enough funds to back them up. And in terms of your larger question about the federal role in education, certainly the federal government, in terms of funding, is a small player. About 14% on average across the United States of funding for public schools comes from the federal government. Of course, it varies from school district to school district depending on the particular characteristics of those school districts. But I do believe in local control for schools. I think that's vital to keep the public commitment and the connection between schools and the communities in which they reside a close one. And I think that it is also vital that the state play an important role in equalizing the funding. What do I mean by that? School districts in Wisconsin rely on property taxes, but we don't want children from property-poor schools, districts, to get inferior educations to those from property-rich schools. And so it is at the state level where there is such an important equalizing strategy, which I think Wisconsin's fallen behind on and can do better on. But I think that the limited role that the federal government ought to take in public education is where there is an issue of national significance, like when we passed the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. What we found was that across the country, there were different practices with regard to whether children with disabilities could get a real education. And there needed to be a mandate to say that there is that expectation. The only caveat is the money has to follow it.
Mr. Baker.
I think that I agree with Congresswoman Baldwin that this is a good concept. President Bush and Senator Kennedy worked hard on this issue. But it needs to be tweaked big time. And I know that because my two kids go to public school, and whenever I walk in the door, I've got their teachers, their principal coming up and wanting to talk to me about these issues. And my boys are only 12 and 10, so if you hire me to go to Congress, I'm going to be able to take that real life, again, that practical experience to Congress. And what they're saying to me is that this idea of teaching to the test is such a problem. I mean, you've got school teachers right now that are out of their own pocket buying snacks so that their students' blood sugar levels can be high enough, because everything comes down to that test. They never bargained for that when they wanted to become teachers, but they're having to do that because everything comes down to that. And it's also a dangerous thing. You know, we've got people out there proposing that teachers should carry guns in the classroom, which is a preposterous idea. But with No Child Left Behind, we've got, in the southern part of our district, in Beloit, where we have some students that maybe shouldn't be in school. I've had some teachers in Beloit say that, you know, we can't expel these kids, we'd like to, but if we do that, it would throw the curve off so much. So, again, I look forward to being able to go to the floors of Congress and be able to report exactly what is going on for my kids, teachers, and principals right here in Wisconsin. Another thing that I just want to say about this, I have 3 younger brothers, and one of my younger brothers, his son, my nephew, has autism. And he and his wife moved to Seattle because Washington State has such a wonderful program for autism. And I'm glad they have moved there. But I'd rather have my family here in Wisconsin. Now, we're talking about, I'm running for a federal office. These are state issues, as the Congresswoman said, to a large degree. And yet we need to use the bully pulpit of these federal offices. I don't want my brother and sister-in-law and my 2 nephews living in Washington State when they really want to be here. He works in law enforcement. I don't want him working in law enforcement here in Wisconsin. I just now want to go back just very briefly and use my remaining seconds. You have not heard Congresswoman Baldwin deny that she has had 7 opportunities to strengthen our borders and protect American jobs, and she's voted against it every single time. Go to DaveMagnum.com. We have a link to the congressional record. She has a record, and she can deny it, but it's in the congressional record. And your students and teachers, I want you to educate yourself, please, before you vote on November 7th.
Congresswoman Baldwin, 1 minute.
Well, on that last point, I think you can generally find in my record that I vote against badly designed bills, and I try to vote for comprehensive, good policies. And the bills that are described are, in my strong opinion, fragmented approaches that won't do the job on immigration. But back to education, the question at hand. I think about the consequences of the policy direction of this president and this Republican-led Congress, and the consequences it had on education and health care. We have an administration that embraced tax cuts for the very wealthiest Americans, depriving our economy of, depriving our government of $11 trillion over the course of 10 years. We're engaged in a war that is costing hundreds of billions of dollars. We're in debt. We're in an annual deficit. What's being cut, what's being harmed, all the other activities of government, which are our investment in people,